Can I see Scotland again, please, Louisa?
Mm.
Do you want to talk about Scotland
To be honest
today?
with you, I've taken it back off. It's there.
Is it? I'm not sure it's still there, is it?
No, it's not there anymore. I took it off. And Andorra's not there either.
Yeah. I do.
I decided to remove it because, to be fair, I think it was a good representation of Scotland, but it was just like an A4 piece of paper that was on my wall, so it looked a little bit rubbish, really.
You treated Scotland like a temporary accommodation.
So, Paul, at the last session, you asked me about whether or not I'd ordered my chocolate-covered almonds.
Yummy. One left.
You eaten them all?
So there's none left. That was actually
none left. That's the packet.
So, during my LinkedIn training, I ate those. They're very delicious. So next time I see you guys, I'm going to bring you a packet each because they are so nice.
Are you sure they'll get there then if they're that delicious?
Well, what I'll do is I'll put an extra couple of packets in for myself, just for the journey, which I tend to do. There's actually 40 grams in here, and they never last anything more than 40 seconds, I don't think. But I'll bring an extra couple of bags just in case I have to.
Oh, please do. Rob, is that a picture of Lenny Henry behind you? Or
it is, yeah.
Did you get your free breakfast this morning? Or
He may surface any moment out of the bed.
He looks very smart there, doesn't it? Actually, the Premier Inns these days. This
is one of the upgrades. Well, not upgrade. This is a refurbed room. Yes.
Yeah, it looks lovely. I like the ambient lighting behind.
Is that still being charged to Amy before he goes? Or?
Sorry.
Is that still being charged to Amy before you go?
Yeah, he's bleeding us for everything you get.
This one's charged to the Darlington Building Society.
If it was Amy, it would have been
That's
the rich.
why he's in a Premier Inn.
Yeah, if it was Amy, it would be 5-star.
Luxury.
I'm going to read out a little intro. Now, I've gathered this from the interweb, so some of it may be true and some of it may not.
The interweb.
But have you AI'd this? Was this your attempt at using AI?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, it's there
completely AI now.
Yeah. I always
it
was.
Isn't Paul. This is
no, it's not Paul. That is computer generated.
Yeah. Well, you just take out the intelligence.
Handle the interruptions.
You take out the intelligence bit. You just put artificial, right? You just stick with A. It's fine. So, Rob Sinclair, right? You thought you were here to just have a bit of banter on the Mortgage Mingle podcast, but no, you're not, because tonight this is your life.
Oh yes, Paul! I'm loving your work.
Oh, it's just taken me ages to do that. I know, I feel quite proud of myself.
Have you got a big red book? Please say you've got a big
exactly.
red book.
Now, what age would you be to still actually get that reference and obviously not? What do you reckon the tipping point is?
I reckon 45. Anything above 45.
Yeah, I reckon 50.
You think that old? Oh, my
it might be
goodness.
50 to remember that.
Yeah.
Really?
I think so.
Depends which version. The original, the Michael Asper version.
I'm over 45. I was going for 45 because clearly that is my age.
Welcome to the Mortgage Mingle Podcast. Today we welcome Rob Sinclair, a pillar of the mortgage industry. As Chief Executive of Amy for 16 years, Rob has guided the industry through numerous challenges and transformations. Now he has announced his decision to step down, marking a new chapter in his life. Rob's journey began with roles at HSBC and Santander before joining Amy's former parent trade body in 2006. Under his leadership, Amy became an independent entity, advocating and working tirelessly for mortgage brokers large and small. He addressed key industry issues, saved the sector millions of pounds and fostered collaboration between lenders and brokers. As Rob says, over the last decade, we've learned to work in partnership, and that's the most fundamental shift. Interestingly, Rob's first career choice wasn't climbing the greasy pole of the mortgage industry. It was pole vaulting, where he says he even beat future Olympic gold medalist Daley Thompson. Sadly, injury and illness halted his sporting ambitions and led him to entering the banking industry. Ultimately, good news for us, of course. Known for his wit and approachable nature, Rob's negotiation skills are legendary. He's looking forward to more personal time, but will remain a familiar figure in the industry. We are thrilled to have Rob Sinclair with us today to share his insights, experiences, and a few laughs. So look, it's great to have you here, and I'm sorry and sad that I wasn't at the Amy dinner, but I understand it was a lovely evening. It was very emotional. What are your thoughts about that night, Rob?
My thoughts about that night. Well, actually, in many ways, I was glad to get the announcement out of the way. In terms of it's been a while coming, and it is the right decision to make at this point because, as Monty will attest, we had a conversation 3 years ago about me doing another 3 years at that point, and I always knew that I'd reached this point and have to have a discussion around: do I stay another 2 years or not? And I decided that I couldn't really commit to another 2 years, getting up at 6:10 every morning and thinking about the mortgage industry as my main waking thought. So the evening itself was wonderful because so many people said so many nice things.
Yeah.
And that was actually really, really beautiful.
So you're not leaving the industry
and then Monty
completely
spoke to me as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I
had nothing nice to say.
I wake up at 6:10 every morning to a photo of Monty. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. But where was I? I've lost my train of thought. Well, in terms of the prompting to actually step down, you say you've had these conversations a few years ago. So what was the actual tipping point? Was it just, look, you know what, I haven't got the stamina. There are other things I want to do with my time. Shouldn't I be asking?
There's a point. Well, why does anybody care? The other bit, it's more about having done the job as long as I have. I always said that you shouldn't do it anywhere near half as long as I've already done it. Because I think you do become stale or cynical or negative if you stay in a job too long, because you begin to see the same cycles coming again and you believe that you've still got the same right answers. And that's perhaps not the same. And there'll be a couple of times recently where, to be fair, the policy team that we've put together have challenged my thinking. Been a couple of occasions where Monty and I have had one view on a direction of travel and they've had an entirely diametric view. And you maybe sometimes think, you know what, you are getting old now. You have got a different perception of the world. And there is another generation that's got to come along and run this industry in the way that they want to run it, not in the way that I think it should be run. And therefore, I think it's important that generation is given the space to be able to do that, because, you know, I've got my view of how it should operate, but the next generation of customers, the next generation of businesses are going to be different. Technology is going to make a difference. And I'm not sure I've got not the energy, but I just think the ideas you're going to have to deal with a new set of technology and challenges in a world that is going to transform quite quickly, I think, needs some different people to rise to those challenges. And it's not that I couldn't, it's just that I felt that it should be somebody else that runs with this now.
I do see that. I see the younger generations, how they think, how they do stuff. I've got a 20-year-old son, as I've said on a few occasions, and you in so many ways, your children, because they're your children, they have a similar mindset. But there are times when you go, oh, that is completely different to how I would have framed that or perceived that. And that happens in life. And why should the mortgage industry be any different? So I totally get that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting because Skipton did a presentation last week, which unfortunately didn't attend, but I've had some feedback from one of the team, and it was specifically around AI. No, they've got over 2 million customers. That's taken over 100 years to gather those customers. Now, naturally, they may not necessarily still be with us, but then you compare that to Monzo, who have not been live for a particularly long period of time and have got the same number of customers. So Skipton are kind of going, right, okay, we've got an aging demographic. They're all in their 70s and 80s. And yet Monzo have got this young, wonderful world that's coming through within the financial services sector. So how do they change and adapt to suit the needs of those younger customers when they've got people like Monzo that they're competing against? And I think you're absolutely right, Robert. That is for us as well to figure out, because as individuals, we are going to get to the point where actually we're no longer I suppose, in vogue. Not that we've ever been in vogue particularly. Well, you lot, obviously. But, we're not necessarily on trend. So, we have to start thinking about whether we adapt or ultimately we just continue to offer the support that we can within the context of what we're about, what we can do. But actually, we need to bring in some new, exciting people into this industry. And I think making the way for it is really important.
Somebody said something to me at the weekend. They went, "So you've decided to leave with dignity before you needed dignitas."
That's another story for another day, that one, isn't it?
On your point, very quickly, Louise, your point about Monzo, really interesting you mentioned that, because I was with a 20-something marketer earlier talking about a marketing campaign, and they brought Monzo up as an example of how marketing is being done very well at the moment. So it's interesting that you mentioned them as well. So well done, Monzo, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Sinclair, can you share some of the most memorable moments from your career in the role that you've had over the last 16 years? And maybe some others if you want to go back further.
You kind of touched on one of the most significant ones, which was the battle we had to take effectively the sale of protection products out of the pensions pot within the financial services compensation scheme, because that on its own over the last decade has saved the mortgage sector probably around, I don't know, £200 million, probably more than that actually, £250 million in costs that would have flowed out of the profit and loss accounts of firms over that period, which would have left a lot less capital left to invest in their businesses. So that was the biggest single win, and that took a fair degree of work. In the first consultation, that wasn't there. We had to fight and have meetings with fairly senior people as was the FCA in hybrid at that point, to get them to change their mind. And they consulted again in order to deliver that because they agreed the argument was right. So that was very significant. I think some of the debates around how we got MMR in the right space, in a better space than it might have been. We fought very hard to try to get them not to destroy interest only, but it's almost taken us a decade now to repair interest only into a place that's almost acceptable again. And we're still probably not dealt with some of the stuff around effectively mortgage prisoners and affordability that some of the rules work, but I'm not sure they're all there in the right way in terms of all of that. But if we hadn't been there fighting the corner, then we would have got much more draconian rules around all of that. And I do think the third bit is that when I took over, Chris Cummings, who I respect enormously because he taught me an awful lot about how to run a trade body, but he'd run a fairly aggressive stance of broker versus lender. And I think the one thing that I've tried to do in my period is work through how do we collaborate and work better. And it's taken time and also taken thinking about. Also now, I look at some of the things we're doing around green and D&I now, where, we're hosting websites, but actually it's all the work that goes on underneath the bonnet there, where we've got working groups of mixtures of lenders and brokers together, doing that activity in partnership and seeing that real benefit of Amy, IMLA working together in a way that was just not even on the agenda, even 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. I think these are massive steps forward, which hopefully will hold the industry in good stead for a long time to come, because that partnership and understanding the coexistence of all of this is critical. And we have to see it as even more than partnership. It's a relationship where you have to really work out how you are going to make the best of what isn't always easy issues to deal with.
Yeah, here, I'd say, putting my lender hat on. I think the lenders that really get that are the most successful ones, quite frankly.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, last week we had an IMLA event for new starters into the industry, which was brilliant, or people that had just been with us for 2 years or less. And it was fabulous because we had representation there from Amy. We had brokers being interviewed about their journey and how progressive that would be, and I don't think we would have had that probably even as little as 5 years ago. So I think we have come an awful long way in a relatively short period of time. So it's brilliant to see, and it's great to have a room full of brokers and lenders who are new to this industry and all keen to learn about various different aspects. So that was really, really encouraging. Last week we had over 160 attendees, so it was brilliant. And obviously Chloe came to to present, and Rachel was there to represent working in mortgages. So again, it was fabulous.
And it's about not being proud about who's hosting it. It's making sure you're in the room.
Yeah, absolutely spot on.
And I think to the point as well about new people coming into the industry, if they come in and the old culture is gone in that respect, they won't ever know what was. So you continue to build, don't you? So on the flip side then, some of the biggest challenges, what's frustrated you the most?
I still get frustrated by a regulator who appears not to understand our industry. I get frustrated by the cost of regulation because I think it's disproportionate to any benefit it's giving us now. I get frustrated by lenders who are making pricing decisions because they think they understand their bank or their lender, but don't understand distribution to the customer well enough, or the impact of the decisions they make sometimes. So we've seen, we've talked about it. You've talked about it on here before about the kind of mental health stress issues that we're seeing across the broker population and the BDM population, because those two populations, the BDM population in particular, are part of the kind of, I don't know what you call them, the shock absorbers of the industry.
Yeah, 100%.
Because when the brokers have a tough time, they talk to the BDM. The BDM takes all that stress and difficulty, and whether a telephone BDM or a face-to-face BDM, they're having to cope with that. I really don't think people are understanding enough how much of that is in certain organisations, how much stress that is causing in where we are. I continue to get frustrated, I think, by some other trade bodies. I mean, it's on the record that I find we're trying to work better in partnership with Ex-Release Council, but every so often they do just, as Monty writes, they grind my gears way past any acceptable level. Because it is a £2 billion industry at the moment who are trying to interpret things and write things which will have impacts on the £400 billion part of the industry. Why do you think? I just don't understand why they think they want to do this. So that frustrates me still, because people need to get their head around their context and not be, I suppose, too arrogant about who they are. I think that's the kind of stuff that still gets to me. I suppose the other bit that still gets me, I suppose, is that there are still too many brokers who think that doing the mortgage is enough and walk past the protection conversation too easily. And I worry about that, because I still think there's a lot of people who might end up in a bad place thinking or looking for that protection when they could have had it and should have had it.
But that's an example of something that happened and then went away for right reasons, i.e., when I started in the industry, you didn't get paid a proc fee for arranging a mortgage. You got paid from, let's be honest about it, doing an endowment policy and, your accident, sickness and unemployment and everything else, buildings insurance. And the mortgage was just the catalyst to enable all that to happen. And then when the endowment scandal happened and that all went away, and lenders, it was at a similar time, lenders recognized that they needed to start paying prop fees because the market became more competitive. That more generally, that push for selling insurance went away, didn't it?
And the big insurance engines got broken up and moved around, and that was all part of a similar type of issue. So there's big training grounds, Allied Dunbar, who not wasn't every cup of tea, but the training they delivered into people. And the structures they taught people about sales management were really important and are the bedrock of a lot of this industry.
Allied Dunbar, Hambro Countrywide. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
Do you get the feeling that protection companies have never really recovered from that? They've never really got a grip of what the market is now. They've never really. They're still, it seems to me, clinging to old-fashioned products, with the exception of one or two. Old-fashioned charging structures, commission structures, etc. And actually, they've been slow to adapt to what I think the new consumers, not just of the future, but even now, want. And that's why one of the reasons we're also seeing declining protection sales.
Yeah, no, go back. If I think about RDR, that revolution happened in the investment industry, the investment advice industry, and whether it was right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. It did cause a sea change in the way that whole market operated. We went through MMR and then European Mortgage Directive that caused changes to the way we had to think and operate. And the last financial crisis meant we cleansed our sector of a lot of very poor practitioners.
Yeah,
we lost thousands of people who were taken off panel because they just weren't good enough. The insurance industry has not gone through any of that type of revolution that forces them to think about the quality of distribution, the quality of their product, the quality of how they deliver things, or their servicing abilities, which are one of the biggest issues at the moment, because their servicing is shocking.
Yeah,
it makes a mortgage lender look really, really efficient.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a sweeping statement, Mr.
You
Sinclair.
are, Louisa, yes, but not everybody is, unfortunately.
I'll speak on behalf of the lender community. We are.
Everyone's trying.
You're a paragon of virtue, Louisa, we know that.
Ah, very good. Very good. So you should be here every week.
Very good, Robert.
What's your perception of how the mortgage industry has changed and evolved over the last 10 years?
For the better. I mean, I think it has evolved for the better. I think you don't have to look at the fact that we crawled into COVID and ended up all on screens like this. And the predictions were that the property market would fall by anywhere 15 to 30%. It didn't. We then fell out of that to financial crisis. I was dragged into meetings in Stratford at the FCA in 2020, early 2022, about the worry of the cost of living crisis that was coming and, what's going to happen to the property market? Is it going to fall off a cliff? And it hasn't. And that's a lot to do with the fact that, the kind of work on deposits, affordability, and making sure that people's incomes are genuine has really got us into a much better place around that. And you only have to look at where we are on arrears and possessions, that it's nowhere near anywhere we've ever been. In these type of cycles, you'd normally see much more pressure than we've seen in this cycle. Lenders are struggling to make provisions based on what they're seeing by way of possession numbers, in all honesty. There's probably a bit of pressure coming through in the buy-to-let sector as some people are struggling to pay their rent, but not in any way the numbers that we thought we would. So, and I think also you have got a broader, much more professional group of brokers who understand what they're doing. You've got lenders who understand very much what their job is. And actually, the fact that we have separated those things out to a greater degree, where the lenders are less wanting to sell themselves and actually accept that the intermediate community is the best route to market, is, I think, help the market be more professional, because as you isolate that out, it makes it more competitive and takes away some of the clouds that get confusion in people's heads when they're managing their businesses, be it lender or broker.
It's interesting because, as you say, some of the growing number of arrears and possessions are actually coming from pre-MMR customers, and not necessarily the ones that have obviously gone through the stringent affordability checks. And when MMR was launched, we were all really quick to get on the bandwagon of what a horrible thing it was. It was, it's going to be the death knell of the mortgage world, etc. And actually, in an environment where interest rates have been increasing over the last few years, it's paid dividends. It's actually turned out to be probably one of the best decisions that was made. We all struggled with it when it was first launched. But I think it's paid dividends, because we can see the difference between those customers pre-MMR and post-MMR.
And Lisa, do you think that actually the structure of MMR then got mapped across in terms of the buy-to-let market? Because that's not suffered anywhere near as much most commentators would have thought it would during what we've gone through in the last.
Yes, so I think most lenders follow the principles of that anyway, with the exception of a few outliers, but the majority follow the principles. But also what you have to remember is you've got between 15 and 20 households queuing up for every new tenancy. So you're not going to see tenants' arrears anything like you might see homeowner arrears, because they're frightened of losing their homes, so they'll find every possible way of paying their rent. Landlords in particular, for what we see, are incredibly resilient, and most of them are portfolio landlords and may have diversified. They may have sold off one or two properties that haven't quite worked out for them, but in the main, if anything, they're actually investing in their portfolios. So I think it's resilient because of the supply and demand mismatch, as opposed to, I think that's the main driver, to be perfectly honest with you, and we need a healthy private rental sector. So long may that continue.
Going back to talking about repossessions, adverse credit, etc. Can you see there being another adverse credit boom?
I think it's quite hard for a lender to come to market and do heavy adverse now because of the capital requirements. I think the way that the supervisors look at capital allocations and weightings around all of this stuff, the levels of supervision of any lender, whether it's unsecured or secured, I think it's very hard for them to do it. And the rates, well, some people will borrow any rate, but the kind of stuff we've got to do on fair value assessment now, no matter which market you're in, I think people are reluctant to step too far across a line in terms of that, take the types of rewards that were there in the past. There's still some stuff in the industry that probably stretches the bounds of credibility sometimes, but I just don't see it in the same way. The debate the regulator always has is, if we don't have some form of area of this, do we drive them to doorstep lenders? And that's the place you don't want to end up again.
As a leader, whether you like it or not, you are a leader in the industry. What has been your approach to leadership and advocacy in the industry? And how have you managed to maintain those strong relationships with lenders and brokers when sometimes they have been quite opposed?
It's really hard to describe this. So I am not a normal line manager. My team do not have, it's a very small team. So it's, I don't have to have the bureaucracy that large organizations have to have. So they don't have objectives. They don't have what I would call regular one-to-ones. They don't have the type of structures that a normal organization would have. But what we do have is virtually 3 or 4 days a week, a 1-hour team meeting at 10 o'clock most days, which Monty drops into occasionally. And those are sessions where sometimes we don't do very much work, but talk a lot about social stuff. And some of those sessions are very technical and very driven along work lines. But it's important that, and I think it's this mixture of, it must be just before COVID, I had a spell where I thought I need to rein back a bit and go to less events. And I did start going to less events. And suddenly started waking up thinking, I'm not enjoying this job as much anymore. And was it because of the events? Well, actually, no, it was because the relationships weren't there. And it happened last week. I went to an event last week and had 3 conversations in virtually a social environment that would have taken me a whole host of work to get to the people and have those conversations on the phone that wouldn't have been as good, or to get them to see them face to face. It would have taken days with PAs to get us both in the same place at the same time. But they can happen organically in those environments very quickly because it's, just a quick word about that. And you have that discussion. And then you move on because you've had the discussion and they know what's coming or they don't know what's coming, and you can have that dialogue. But it's also an element where sometimes you have lots of, and I say this a lot about some of the stuff we've achieved in AMI, is I don't want to shout about it too much because the reason we've won at the FCA or with the Ombudsman is because we don't go and shout about it afterwards. And when we go back, we have the conversation. I say to some people, if they're in trouble with a lender and going off panel, the last place you want to go is go and talk to a journalist who's then painted that lender into a corner. Yeah. Once you've told the journalist and the journalist is on it, the lender's going to go, whoa, I'm not getting involved now. I'm not commenting. You can just go away now. And it's knowing when to have the right conversation with people that you've built trust with, I think is the biggest thing. And that is one of the challenges of this job is you have to be here long enough to have the trust of people to tell you the things you need to know, but also to have those conversations around how far can you go and not go. And there's, without getting to too much of current stuff, I mean, there's clearly issues at the moment around the demise of Tenet and some of the implications of that. And I'm clearly involved in some discussions about that with a range of people. Do I want to go very public on all of that? No, I don't, because that would therefore make the discussions ineffective. So the challenge of that leadership is, how are you visibly able to lead? And Monty knows this, I think, it's part of the structures we have within AMI of having a main board, it's the decision-making bit, it's the policy-making bit. We have an industry contact group that's got lots of similar people from similar organisations, but they're the salespeople in that organisation. We have a compliance forum, a risk forum, that's got all the compliance people in it that we talk to about the same issues. We get very different answers on things from the sales guys. But we've got a protection group, we've got a later life group, we've got a whole host of people that we touch. Yeah. And I think what's also shifted is over the last 15 years, there was, when I came into this job, the one press spokesman. And God bless Ray, because he was a great press spokesman. But we've now got a whole range of people who comment in the press, but they comment in the press based on knowledge of the line that AMI advocates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, who are they, please?
We need to get them on, Paul.
He's not in the mood today, is he? That's clear.
What?
I am very.
But there are guys like Dave. There are guys like Dave Hollingworth at LNC.
He's very good, and obviously Monty. Yeah,
and your occasional fellow panelist, when he can bother to turn up, is also really good on press speaking now as well. And we've got people like Rachel Geddes now coming into the frame and doing stuff on television, which is really good and powerful, because these are people who do the day job, who can answer the questions based on the real customer experience, as opposed to me who's theoretical. And, the last, I almost can't remember now the last time I sat in front of a real customer.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. I'm not relevant in that anymore. So it's having the right people who've got the right knowledge based on all the stuff that we give to them. That therefore means they're not on message, but they're certainly on song, if that makes sense.
What?
Go on.
No, you carry on. I was just going to ask you a question.
Ask away.
Okay, I was going to ask you what it's like working with Robert and what you're going to miss about working with Robert.
No comment. Can I have an easier one? Can I have one on sport? Yeah, right.
Yeah, who's gonna win tomorrow night?
So, we're not talking about football.
Sport.
I wouldn't have put myself forward to be chairman if Robert wasn't there, I don't think. I think that was very important. That was an important part to me of wanting to work with Robert and wanting to get some of his views and his knowledge and just try and, from conversations we had in the past and from being on the Amy board for a while, I knew we had some similar views with certain things and the way the industry was going. And actually I wanted to work with Robert, and actually I haven't been disappointed. It's been fun.
Time yet.
Yeah, I know. It's been fun, a lot of fun. It's been very, very instructive. It's been inspirational in parts. And I think actually working with Robert he always gives you something to think about. When you think you have an answer and then you speak to Robert, you sort of challenge the answer that you've got to. So I always say, if we go into a meeting with, say, the FCA or someone like that, and I'll come out and I'll go, "Oh, that was interesting. They said this." And Robert will look at me and go, "No, they didn't." And I go, "What do you mean?" I said, "They said this, but actually they meant this." Or because they didn't answer this question. He's very good at and that's what's hard to replace. It's that political side of things, which is very good at interpreting what's said, but also what's not said. And that's been a brilliant learning curve for me, and something that I found really, really interesting. And actually, it's why I probably listen a lot more now rather than just go meh, 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 is because actually listen to how people are saying things, listen to what they're saying and listen to what they're not saying, I think is very interesting. But working with Robert has been brilliant. And I feel honoured that I was able to be chairman with when he was here.
So do you think you've...
Well, he sounds like he's dead.
Yeah. He's still breathe.
We shall miss dear Robert.
Breathe.
No, I don't know. How else do you answer the question? That's the question. Yeah. He's leaving. No, he's not dead.
I was going to say, do you think you've almost learnt a new language in respect of those communication skills that are required?
I think
when you're
I'm
talking to
there.
the regulator.
Yeah, I think I'm getting there, but nowhere near. Just there's it's years and years of experience. And I don't have the vast experience. I've never worked for a lender, for example. So while I speak to Louisa or you, Paul, or all these other people, and I get a sense of it, I've never actually been in it. So I never really understand some of the dynamics and how things work. I've never worked at a regulator. So I'm there to bring the passion for broking. And that's what I'm proud at.
Yeah, it must be incredibly frustrating for you both when you are in with a regulator and you're talking to people that have never actually worked in our sector of the industry.
In their lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that must be...
They've never actually had a proper job in their lives.
Yeah,
or a mortgage.
For a mortgage.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's one of the questions I have asked in there occasionally of people who I come across occasionally. I think, well, this is going to be interesting. They ask the question, have you ever woken up and wondered, has your employer got the money to pay you this month? Because if you haven't, you've never actually run it. You've never been involved in a business that's on the edge or a small business, or you're then preaching to people. Those people who live in that space are entirely different people to the people you think they are.
Yeah.
And you can't possibly understand them, because the people who put themselves out there to be entrepreneurs and run businesses and do all of that are entirely different to those people who work in corporates who have never thought in their lives as whether they're going to get paid at the end of the month or not. Because it just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It just happens by magic, by osmosis. There's no dynamic. I remember working, we were doing a piece of work back in my Midland Bank days, and we asked the question, somebody said, we're in the marketing department. They said, oh, well, it's only £1,000. And I went, that's really interesting, only £1,000. How many personal loans do you have to sell to make £1,000 profit? I went, sorry? I said, how many personal loans does a branch have to sell to make £1,000 for you to spend that? And they had no idea what. They couldn't even compute the question, never mind the answer. Because the disconnect of cost and income in most organizations is vast. Some people just work in little silos and they have no comprehension of the implications of the decisions or the decisions they're making. And that's why, you know, when I go back and look at my career, I say I was exceptionally blessed. I can only do the job the way I've done this because of the 20 odd 30 years I did in banking before this. But I had 30 years of every year in that career was a different set of experiences. I don't think I had 2 years where the experience was the same twice. And that was what gave me a rich view. And I also worked with some stunningly brilliant people and some stunningly nice people. And occasionally I worked for some real bastards. And that teaches you so many things. You know, when you've spent all day putting a lending application together and you take it into your regional director and he's flicking through it and he finds a mistake, one manual, because these were done on manual typewriters then, one typo on page 12, he tears the whole 25 pages in half and throws it back across the office at you. That's bullying. But you have to smile, pick it up, apologize, and go and do it again. Because that was the culture. Would I ever want to create that culture anywhere else? Absolutely not. But having lived through it and learned and worked out how to dismantle that in a bank was quite interesting. You asked me a question earlier about what made me, and one of the things was, 20 years at HSBC, 6 years at Santander, learning about how all of the, I was a branch manager, business banking manager, a private banking manager. I did audit, I did cost reduction, I did marketing, I did training. I did a host of different jobs in different structures that taught me so much about how organizations run and operate. And that's the background that gives you the ability to then do this job in a way that's probably slightly different when you've only worked in relatively narrow silos. I was
agree.
A real generalist.
I feel incredibly privileged myself because having worked as a lender, as a packager, as a broker, and in all different areas of lending, it just gives you that rounded view that you don't ordinarily have. So I can understand where you're coming from. You've been a strong advocate for diversity and inclusion within the industry. What progress have you seen in this area, and what more needs to be done?
When we started that journey, we had no idea where it was going to go. And when we got that first bleed out of the market research, it was a shock. I mean, it wasn't a shock. It was just difficult to see it there in black and white, I think. With people's views and opinions and their recountings of their experiences. Have we come far enough? No. Have we got distance to go? Yes. Monty and I were laughing about D&I fatigue the other day because everybody is fatigued, but that's the wrong answer to the question. Do we have better representation? Yes. Is it an open debate now? Yes. Do I think there's better chances for... There's less chance of discrimination now? Yes. But do I still think that some large organisations are paying lip service to at a very senior level? I think so, probably. But the energy levels across what I would call the ground is just vast now, and that's hugely different now. But that reflects society as well. I think, I'm looking around here and I know that Louisa's got a young daughter, Monty's got young kids. Paul, I've got no idea what you've got. You've got a son. And I've got a stepson who's 21. So we've all got this issue of kids who are about to enter the world of work, and we want them into a world of work that's fair, and where they'll be treated well, and where they'll be given opportunity based on their ability, not on anything else. Where their sexuality doesn't matter, where their colour doesn't matter, where they actually are just treated as their ability to interact with other people and deliver in the job they're in. That's how it should be. It's not the world we've had. It's not the world we've had, because there are far too many people who've found their progress other way blocked for various reasons. I still see it now, where people reach a certain level in organisations, particularly if they're black, and they find it really difficult and they leave, and it's not good. And we hear these stories, but how all of the mechanisms of whistleblowing and all the rest of it don't work, because they don't work well enough, and they're not sophisticated enough, and they're still seen as troublemakers or antagonistic and all the things that go with that. So there's loads still to do. Are we on a journey? Absolutely. Am I glad we've started it? Absolutely. Do I think it'll be finished in my lifetime? I hope so, because it has to. Otherwise, we'll end up in an industry that's different from the society we operate in, and that can't be right.
But there's some amazing schemes that are being developed. There's Progress Together that are developing a scheme for maybe middle managers who have maybe not got the opportunity to progress any further, and then they're switching between different companies within the industry. So there's a few people, including Paragon, incredibly proud to be involved in it. Yep. We're going to have people that will go on a sabbatical, as it's not a sabbatical, but they'll go on and spend time in another company and learn how that company interacts with their people and how they learn, and then what they bring back is going to help Paragon, and it will help them as individuals. And I think that's amazing. And those are people that haven't necessarily had the right start in life, particularly, or had the privileges that some other people might well have had. So I think there are some amazing schemes that are coming to the fore that will take time to play out, but they're happening. And these were never even discussed as little as 5 years ago. So I think it's brilliant.
I was talking to Hannah Oates about this last week at an event. I talked to Hannah about different learning styles, because she's a different learning style to me. And she has to do audio. I have to read. We're poles apart in terms of how we learn. But we have an education system that teaches most people through a single unitary way, which is crazy, which is why some people really struggle, because not everybody learns in the same way as other people. And we need, as a society, to begin to understand all of this better, and particularly those people who are somewhere on the spectrum, where they've got great brains, but sometimes we really struggle to work out how we harness them. That's where all of this has to become better.
I think what we've done is definitely set the tone for the next generation, and that's really important. So the energized people that you're talking about, who are helping both us and IMLA and DIF and all the people involved in all of that, they're the future leaders as well. So they're going to demand it. Our clients are going to demand it, and actually there will be that sea change. And just after the Amy dinner, someone texted me and just said, "Thank you, that was a great event. You all made me feel really safe." And that was a young woman in the industry, and that shows that we're moving in the right direction, where young women can go to dues like that and feel just like all of us.
And if I look at that first Amy dinner back in 2012 and look at the one that we just had in 2024, the mixture of people is massively different, different. And that's much more reflective of the society we operate in, which is how it should be.
Yeah, good. How was Monty's speech, by the way? What? I lost you.
That the Amy dinner was the most diverse event they've ever been to.
Oh, good.
And that it was really nice to see.
Yeah.
It was all right until Monty decided to go off on one about not wanting certain people there, so it was all right.
Oh, were you abusive in your speech?
You are not welcome.
You are not welcome.
I just said if people want to sexually harass people or they want to racially abuse people, then you're not welcome. And I don't care what job title you have or how much business you write.
Okay, so looking forward to the future of the industry. What do you predict for the future of the industry? Are there any emerging trends or challenges that you think the industry should be preparing for?
There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, AI, what impact it might have. I think there's lots of people playing around the edges of this, some people investing in it. I think we'll see things begin to come in which will work for some people and not for others. I think some people will embrace it early, some people will wait a bit and adopt it later. I'm not sure how consumers will feel about it. In that, if I think about I think of something like a bit of technology that will convert a conversation into a fact find and an application, how comfortable is the customer with all of that being recorded and held somewhere? It's there already in a format, but I'm not sure how ready consumers are for all of this. I still think, from my perspective, there is still a strong need and lead for human interaction in the process. I think somebody's borrowing north of £200,000, they probably want somebody to have the whites of eyes and hold their hand a bit through the process, particularly if it's their first or second time transacting on a new property, because it is complicated and nobody understands it. It really is difficult. So I think good quality brokers, I think the issue will be how people adapt to the changes in technology which are bound to come. So I think it's about people being aware that the innovations that are coming will change things. Therefore, be on the front foot and think about how you're going to embrace that and how you're going to make it effective in your business, as opposed to just waiting for it to happen to you and perhaps finding that you're blockbusters.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit cliched, but it's making sure that the AI works for you as a human rather than takes over for you. I think if you asked a young person if they could avoid human interaction in any transaction, they'd probably say, yes, please. But because this is such a massive transaction and the most money most people will borrow in their lives, then the door, you're leaning on an open door, because it's like, help, I can't do this on my own. I do need that help. And I think a lot of it's just to allay the anxiety that's caused. Does the average person remember everything that the mortgage brokers said to them during the process? Probably not. But are they, the really good ones are almost like counselors where, I'm stressed about this. I can't find that. It's like, right, just relax. It's all good. We can sort this. We can, the lenders come back with this. What do I do? It's fine. We can do this. So I've always thought that the broker role is much more than just giving advice on the mortgage. It's taking control of that person's emotional security for a period. And I think that'll be required for younger people. But it's probably one of the few areas that will stay like that.
But it doesn't have to be face to face. It can be like this. It can be virtual.
Oh yeah,
and so I think getting used to. And I was saying the other day, I spend so much time on screens like this, and I have got better and better at watching everybody. My eyes dart around watching everybody, looking for actions and reactions. There are some people who are quite passive in this process who still just don't even begin to really engage. If you're in a room in a meeting, you can pick up a lot of non-verbal signals and attitudes. You have to work much harder in this environment. I mean, we've not been trained in this at all. We haven't been trained in this. And so there are those of us who will instinctively be better at it than others. And you just have to fight. You will find your own way in all of this, but you have to think about this as a cultural thing that's going to be different going forwards.
People who come to us as wanting a mortgage, if you ask them what they want, they'll say, yeah, I'm looking for this and this. And 9 times out of 10, they walk out with something completely different, because you've actually had time to talk to them, to actually ask proper questions, etc. And if you're just following even quite a sophisticated AI model, I don't believe, certainly not now, and certainly probably not for the next 10 years or so, you don't get to that same space. You don't. Because
Monty,
actually,
what are the trends?
I know how to manipulate it. I'm talking about manipulation of AI. So let me explain. So if I've got a questionnaire as a customer in front of me, then I think I know where, in my head, I know where I want to end up. So therefore, I'm answering the questions in a way that I think will get me as a customer, as a consumer, to the outcome I want in the first place. Whereas if you've got a broker, a human being, who's questioning some of those answers that I'm giving, you get to a very different place. And that's where I'd say the right place is.
Yeah, no, I get that. And what I was going to ask was what were those trends when people come in and they come in wanting something and they go out having something else? And the reason I asked that is we see that from a lender perspective. One of the trends that gets spoken about a lot when you are creating a product is brokers will say, must have the ability for overpayments, must have the ability to make those capital repayments, those lump sums. And I tell you, it's Louisa, you'll know more than me these days, but it's a tiny, tiny proportion of people that actually do that. But there seems to be such a loud noise about it that isn't the reality. So what do you see from a customer perspective?
Well, it is true. That is one of the things, because a customer who goes into it thinking, I want a mortgage and I want to pay it off as quickly as possible, and this is what I'm going to do. But actually, life gets in the way of doing that. So I would say 99 times out of 100, every time we've put someone on a product that might have 10 or even 20% overpayments, and the plan is they do that and they overpay, when we see them again, they haven't. Of course they haven't, because actually they needed a holiday or they needed a car. Or I'll tell you what, the boiler went. It was a nightmare. And that to me is a great example of the need for advice at every stage. Because if you're just going through a lender PT route without getting advice at every stage, you're never revisiting that conversation. Where actually it was, well, last time we met, you said you were going to pay off. How are we going to do that? How are you going to actually, what can you put aside now? Maybe let's change the term a bit. So I'll tell you what, so actually we can reduce we can get the term down a little bit. So all those discussions are really important. As a broker who's looking after clients again and again and again, you're always referring back to the last conversation you had to them. And that's really important. That's part of the advice process. So it's interesting. When a client comes to you, of course, they want the cheapest rate. They want it in 2 days, and they want to be overpay and fix and variable and everything. They want everything. So because they don't really, people's understanding of mortgages is actually very, very limited, and no surprise, because they don't do it that often. So it's about asking those.
But I think that's a great point you make, though. Yeah, it's a great point you make about staying in touch with your customer, so that you can constantly reassess what's going on with their lives to see if you can help them repay that loan earlier than originally planned.
We want to get them the finance that helps them buy their dream house, and then we want to look at ways that they can get rid of that finance as quickly as possible.
I'm waiting now, Paul, for the big tearjerker who you could bring on screen as you close the red book.
Well, you are in the Premier Inn. I might have lined somebody up.
I just heard a knock at Robert's door, and I don't know whether that was anything. I don't know whether it was the turn down service.
It's Lenny.
Or whether there was a red book.
He's going to get paranoid now.
Lee's not in Germany. Lee's not in Germany.
You thought Lee was in Germany, but tonight.
We haven't. To be fair, I'm conscious we haven't spoken about PTs or stuff like that at all, and perhaps we'll stay off that for now. And conscious of time,
the turn down service can wait.
Yeah, exactly. Do you get little chocolates?
Yeah, but not the chocolate, Abe. They're going to bring the chocolate. That cannot wait. Yeah. I mean, clearly I didn't wait for my chocolates.
This is Premier Inn. You know there's nothing like that.
As you prepared to hand over the reins, what advice would you give to your successor? And what qualities do you believe are essential for the role?
The advice I give to most people is be authentic and be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because that you'll end up in trouble quite quickly. if you don't know the mortgage industry well, you're going to have a crash course in it. And there's lots of people around who will help you with that. Lenders and broker firms will help you with that, because most between IMLA, even UK Finance, PSA, AME, there's lots of people who understand that having a successful AME is actually a coefficient to a successful industry. And therefore, I think there's a lot of goodwill around that. The other part is be prepared to listen and pick your fights carefully. You don't have to be in conflict. You don't have to. There are occasions where you have to. The other bit was, I suppose, is that early on I felt I had to be rent-a-gob and comment on anything and everything in order to get visibility and status. Mm-hmm. I probably comment less now than ever did. I still occasionally feel I have to vent or be out there visible on certain issues. But I think the advice is also trust your team. You've got a good team around you. And trust your board to help you, because they will. And have respect for an industry that's bloody good at what it does. Mm. And I think you can come into this and think you're going to change the world. The world will choose when there are things that you need to change. And being more alive to that, I think, is quite important.
I want to take you back to the beginning. This is this is your life moment. So talk to us. Tell us about your pole vaulting career and aspirations.
I was taught to pole vault by the then British record holder when I was very young. I was only 9 years old. Mm. And I was very lucky. I was at a school where the games master was a former pole vaulter. We had a British junior champion who'd been there as a pole vaulter, and I followed in the footsteps. I was a fair to average pole vaulter is the best way to describe it. I wasn't great. I made Scottish International. It was never going to be British International, never good enough, not even close. Mm. But I dreamed, like most people have, of trying to be better than I was. When I joke about beating, I used to compete against Daley Thompson in British League matches. I also competed against Nigel Wilson, who was the chief executive of L&G in British League matches. We worked that out when we sat together at dinner last year. And it's very interesting to do that sporting thing. I was also blessed because I was in an athletics club that had, at the same time I was there, Alan Wells, Olympic champion, Alistair Hutton, twice winner of the London Marathon, a guy called John Robson, who won silver at the Commonwealth Games 1500. It was a great team, a guy called Gus Mackenzie, who was the first Briton to jump 7 foot in the high jump. A great team of people. I was a club captain for 4 years. I got to compete with them and compete around the country and meet great athletes. Steve Avett, Daley. Daley was great because Daley always treated every competitor like a competitor. Didn't matter who you were. A British League match in a pissing down rain in North London, he'd still be in your ear trying to put you off. He would be. Because it didn't matter whether it was Hinkson in an Olympic final or you in the rain in North London. He would still want to beat you and make sure you weren't going to beat him. And that's why he was a great athlete and a great person, because he treated everybody with that equality.
A great competitor.
But a fair competitor. And that taught me lots about different things, but it gave me a big hang-up about two things for a long time. One was I had to get over the fact that as a pole vaulter, it's one of the only events, high jump is the other one, where you always end in failure. And that actually, when you come to recognize that, is only you've been successful, you then fail. The other one is that I recognized that most of the athletes who were better than me were very myopic, very focused, and very self-centered.
And very tall.
As opposed to me, who's not. And let's remember, when people say Robert's got big shoes to fill, people got big shoes to fill, Roberts, I'm only size 7, so they aren't really that big. But the whole thing is centered around the fact that I felt those people, to be successful, you have to be this type of person. And it took me a long time to unpick that in my head as well. That actually you can be different to that and still be a winner and still be successful. But when you live in that space of sport, you end up with a very, very strange view of the world because of that. Because actually to be successful in an Olympic individual sport, that's where you have to be. I think if you end up successful in a team sport, you end up in a different place. And therefore, there's things that come out of that make you a different person. It took me a long time to become the person I am now as opposed to the person I was then.
So I suppose it taught you a lot of resilience.
It's the resilience that...
How to, as you say, how to fail.
Away from it.
How to fail, keep positive.
Yeah, and I always... It's a weird thing. When something happens, some people run towards trouble and some people run away from things that are happening. I've always been one of those persons, if something starts to kick off, I'll be running towards it. Whether it's a car accident or a fight, it's,
Oh, I think on that note, I think it would be a great place to finish the conversation. Rob Sinclair, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for today. Really, really appreciate it.